Hi, and welcome back to my GNM Digestible Morsel series. In this video, I will be presenting the third biological law of nature. And here is where it gets really interesting, and it can also be very confusing at the start. So I will try to keep things as simple as I can, because we can always go into things in a bit more detail in additional videos if we need to in the future. So as I'm going to be building on information that I've presented in the previous videos, please make sure you have watched these before moving on. And just to very briefly summarise, in the first law we saw that what we call disease is a purposeful and meaningful biological program which is triggered by a conflict shock to assist the organism to cope with a trauma. And this program happens at the psyche, brain, and organ levels. In the second law, we saw that the biological programs run in two phases, the conflict active phase and the healing phase, which occurs after the conflict has been resolved. And we also looked at some complications that can occur. So the third law is all about the ontogenetic system of biological special programs. Ontogenetic means the origin and development. This law shows how GNM is rooted in embryology and the evolution of life on the planet. By understanding this law, we can see how not only does the science of GNM logically follow the development process in a way that is purposeful, but it also connects us to all of nature. It gives GNM order and meaning and helps us to realise that not only we, but all of nature is perfectly fine-tuned for survival. So we'll begin with a basic introduction to embryology, which I skipped at the start of my learning, and therefore it took longer for me to understand this law. So the embryo develops in 3 germ layers. A germ layer is basically a group of cells that developed at the same time. These 3 germ layers are called the endoderm, the mesoderm, and the ectoderm, and they develop in that order. Dr. Harmer found that the cells of each germ layer responded to conflicts that impacted in the part of the brain that formed at the same time as that germ layer only, and therefore each germ layer is like its own complete system. He also discovered that each germ layer ran biological programs which followed the same process, which I will explain in a moment. In addition, Dr. Harmer also found that some of the cells of the mesoderm germ layer were controlled from the cerebellum, and this ran programs the same as the brainstem, and that some were controlled by the cerebral medulla, which ran the same type of programs as the cerebral cortex. Because the brainstem and cerebellum were formed first, they were considered the old brain, and the cerebral medulla and cerebral cortex were considered the new brain. Therefore, for simplicity, the mesoderm was split into the old mesoderm and the new mesoderm. So here is an illustration of this. We have the cells of the alimentary canal that form the endoderm germ layer controlled by the brainstem, whose purpose is for the basic functions of life such as digestion, breathing and procreation. The cells of the old mesoderm are controlled by the cerebellum and they serve the function of protection. The cells of the new mesoderm are controlled by the cerebral medulla and their function is for movement and stability. And the cells of the ectoderm are controlled by the cerebral cortex, and the function of these is our separation from and interaction with the outside world. Amazingly, but then maybe not surprisingly when you consider the absolute beauty and perfection of nature, the conflicts experienced in each germ layer are relevant to their function, and I will elaborate on this briefly in a moment. If you take note of the colours of the germ layers too, these are used consistently throughout GNM diagrams to easily identify the germ layer that's involved, and therefore we can identify the type of biological program that's involved. So going back to the first law, we saw that Dr. Hammer found the correlation between the psyche-brain organ. So now we will look at the control centres in each brain layer as the information can be brought all together and to make more sense. So first we have the control centres of the brainstem. These organs and parts of the body are those involved in the basic needs of life and are in perfect order, mirroring the archaic ring of early life and development. Conflicts are all related to traumas that threaten the basic functions of life, such as breathing conflicts, procreation conflicts, and what is known as morsel conflicts, which is to do with anything that is brought into the body, digested, absorbed, or eliminated. In GNM terms, this is known as incoming and outgoing morsels. It might be easier to think of the word morsel as something. The purpose of the biological programs controlled from this brain layer are to facilitate better catching, digestion, absorption, or elimination of a morsel. And to do this, there is cell proliferation when the conflict is active to increase the surface area so the morsel is better caught, digested, absorbed, or eliminated. Then once the conflict is resolved, these extra temporary cells will be removed. This brain layer does not follow the right and left-sided biological handedness rule that we went through, as it was developed before we had a right and left side. Instead, the layer is split down the centre with incoming morsels on the right and outgoing morsels on the left. So next we will look at the cerebellum, which controls these body parts, and the function of these is protection, as they cover and protect us. The corium skin is our underskin. So from now on, the right and left rule applies, because from now on in our development we did have a right and left side. The conflicts that impact in this brain layer are types of attack conflict, because their function is protection. So these attacks can be figurative or literal. As well as the right or left side indicating who or what may be involved, the conflict can be localized. So it could be like a localized attack to a specific area. An example is walking on a dirty floor barefoot or wearing sweaty shoes may trigger a feeling soiled conflict, which causes athlete's foot. Feeling soiled is a type of attack. It's like an attack from dirt that we need protection from. The purpose of the biological program is to provide extra protection temporarily while the conflict is active. So we will see cell proliferation to thicken the protective surface in the first phase, and once the conflict is then resolved, the extra cells will then be removed. So next we have the cerebral medulla, which is part of our white matter. Little is known in mainstream about the white matter of the brain. So the control centres are formed in perfect order, mirroring the structure of our body. These are concerned with our structure and movement. These control centres are impacted by self-devaluation conflicts. In other words, by our own negative thoughts and self-worth and blame for things we cannot do or things that happen to us. This self-devaluation can be related to a person. So this we would see from the right or left side. It could be related to us being unable to do something in a certain situation. These could be localized, so we're devaluing a part of our body for not being able to do something. And even can be related to ourselves as a whole. The purpose of the biological programs run at this level are to make the tissue better. As the self-devaluation says, I'm not good enough. So in the active phase, we will see cell loss, such as ulceration and necrosis, where the tissue is being broken down in order for it to be replaced by stronger tissue in the healing phase. Continued self-devaluation thoughts and beliefs can cause hanging healings, where the tissue is constantly being removed and replenished, and this is the cause of chronic conditions such as arthritis and even fibromyalgia when we devalue ourselves as a whole. So next there is the cerebral cortex, which is a very complex brain layer. Here we have the presensory, the sensory, post-sensory motor cortexes, and the temporal lobe. The parts of the body controlled by this brain layer are regarding our interaction with and separation from the outside world. Therefore, the conflicts here are related to territorial type conflicts, sexual conflicts, scare conflicts, and separation conflicts. The temporal lobe is split into male on the right, governing testosterone, and female on the left, governing estrogen. And the conflicts that impact these control centres are male territorial conflicts on the right and female conflicts such as scare and sexual conflicts on the left. So normally women will only experience the female conflicts and men will only experience male conflicts. However, this changes when the hormone status changes. These changes occur when someone is on hormonal drugs, when they are past a certain age, such as postmenopause in women, or just an older gentleman whose testosterone level is naturally dropped, when there is a pregnancy, or where there's breastfeeding. In these circumstances, we will effectively change sex in terms of conflicts. So this means a pregnant woman will become more territorial, and an elderly man will experience female conflicts instead of male. If the person is left-handed, the opposite control centre is impacted by the conflict. So this means that it is not always possible to experience certain conflicts and biological programs which actually explain why something like a fatal heart attack, which is experienced in the coronary arteries, is more common in men, and why hemorrhoids involving the rectum is more common in women. So I won't go into that in any more detail, as it may get a little confusing, but if we bring back the compass and add these germ layers to it, we can see that the brainstem and cerebellum, classed as the old brain, have cell proliferation in conflict active phase and cell removal assisted by fungi and bacteria in the healing phase. And the cerebral medulla and cerebral cortex, classed as the new brain, have cell loss in the conflict active phase and cell replenishment assisted by bacteria in the healing phase. This means that all cell growth and tumours that form in these programs, the new brain programs, are part of a replenishment process and therefore could be termed as a curative tumour, whereas the mainstream will class this as cancer. So I hope this has helped you to understand the third law, and I look forward to sharing a lot more GNM with you next time. Thank you for watching.